Good evening, everyone, and thank you, as always, for joining. We were learning the halachos of Hadlokas Nerot Shabbos, the mitzvah of lighting the Shabbos candles, and last week we discussed some of the reasons behind the mitzvahs and some of the insight into how to understand this very beautiful and special mitzvah. We spoke about the halachic definition of the mitzvah and what exactly triggers it, both the concept of covered Shabbos, the honor to be shown to Shabbos, which applies in the preparations made before Shabbos, and the mitzvah of oneg Shabbos, which is the enjoyment of Shabbos itself. I want to start this week by looking at the procedure of lighting the Nerot Shabbos and try and understand the procedure of lighting. And what I'd like to do is run through it in a sense twice. Once talk about the ideal way to light, and then explore in more depth why this is the ideal way to light and what happens if one finds oneself in a non-ideal situation. So what's the ideal way to light the Nerot Shabbos? So prior to the lighting, one should try and finish all one's preparations for Shabbos. And this is because the lighting itself is the final preparation for Shabbos, because normally speaking, with lighting, Shabbos itself is ushered in. And that means to say that if at all possible, one should already have washed for Shabbos, finish cleaning the house, doing everything one needs to do, and be ready for Shabbos and dressed in Shabbos clothes, and therefore lighting and immediately entering into into Shabbos. We'll see later what to do if one's running late, but that's the ideal way to light. In addition, ideally speaking, one should daven mincha before lighting, because mincha is the weekday mincha, and with lighting, one enters into Shabbos, and arguably, we'll see later whether this is indeed the case or not, but arguably it would no longer be appropriate to daven weekday mincha, since one has already lit the Shabbos candles and accepted the Shabbos with that. When does one make the Beracha upon lighting? So the ideal order is first of all to turn on all the electric lights around the house. And the reason for this is because, as we saw, in truth, even though the core mitzvah is lighting b'mokom achila, in the place that one eats, nonetheless, other reasons behind the mitzvah, including shalom bayis and not bumping into furniture and the like, would equally apply through the rest of the house. And the minimum mitzvah, as we saw, is to light one candle, but we light two candles. But in truth, were we still in the candle lit age, it would be appropriate to light candles in other rooms also. We nowadays fulfill that by having the electric lights on and just light one or two special candles, the Lahavah Shabbos, but nonetheless, the electric lights should be on throughout the house. And therefore, it's appropriate before lighting to ensure that all the electric lights are on. As we discussed, one should finish the preparations for Shabbos, and therefore once one's lit, it's ready Shabbos, one won't be able to turn the lighting on. But even if there's other members of the household who could turn the lighting on at that point, nonetheless, there's an additional reason to ensure one has all the lights on before one lights the Shabbos candles, because that way one is attaching them and linking them to the lighting of the Shabbos candles, and therefore all the turning on of the lights are done covered Shabbos in the honor of Shabbos. And they're not just left on because I happen to want the lights on, but they're left on because I understand that this is the appropriate way to do. This is part of my cover to Shabbos to ensure that the light is, to ensure that Shabbos is honored with light. So one turns on the electric lights in the room, and after that one then proceeds to light the Shabbos candles. When should one make the Beracha on lighting the Shabbos candles? So there's two minhagim, two ways of doing this. I'll start with the more well-known methods, because this is the opinion of the Ashkenazi custom, and many Sephardim also follow this ruling, which is that one makes the Beracha on the mitzvah of lighting the Shabbos candles after lighting. And the reason for this is because once one has lit and made the Beracha, one has accepted Shabbos upon oneself. The concept of lighting Shabbos candles is lighting Shabbos candles, candles for Shabbat. And therefore the lighting needs to be attached to Shabbos. Ideally speaking, one shouldn't light and then not yet keep Shabbos, because through the lighting, one's lighting for the onset of Shabbos. So it is true that if one is unable for some reason to accept Shabbos at the time of lighting, one can make a condition that even though I'm lighting, I'm not yet starting Shabbos. But this is far from ideal, because the lighting should be the lighting of Shabbos light, and therefore linked to the onset of Shabbos. And therefore the default setting is that once I've lit and made the bracha, Shabbos has been accepted. And therefore the Ashkenazi practice is that were we to make the bracha before lighting, we then wouldn't be able to light because we've accepted Shabbos upon ourselves. Now it is true, as I said, that as long as one has in mind that one's not accepting Shabbos when you're saying the bracha, one can light the candles afterwards. Nonetheless, since normally speaking the bracha invokes the start of Shabbos, therefore Ashkenazi practice is that one first lights the candles and then afterwards says the bracha, and through so doing accepts Shabbos upon oneself. If one accidentally recited the bracha first, the presumption would be, since one was intending to light, that one didn't mean to accept Shabbos upon oneself, and therefore one would still be able to light. So Ashkenazi practice is to first light and then make the bracha. Now this is against the general rule that we make brachas in advance of doing the mitzvah. All brachas should be made over l'asiyatan in advance of doing the mitzvah. Why is this so? Well, one reason is because a primary reason for saying a bracha on a mitzvah is, as the Ritva explains, in order to focus one's attention on the mitzvah, to prepare for doing the mitzvah, and reminds oneself, I'm about to do a mitzvah, and I'm doing this because I am commanded to so do. And therefore it's right to say the bracha before doing the mitzvah. So generally we make brachas before doing mitzvahs. Nonetheless, the Ashkenazi practice is in this case not to do so, in order to avoid the complications of accepting Shabbos before lighting. The minority practice, which is the view of the Shulchan Aruch, and still followed by some Sephardi communities, is to make the bracha and then light. And the reason for this is because they argue that making the bracha isn't accepting Shabbos. Okay, I'm going to try and do it like this and see if that can work. Apologies for the disruption. So I think I was just in the middle of explaining Sephardi practice. Ashkenazi practice, as I said, is to light first and then make the bracha. However, Sephardi practice, the view of the Shulchan Aruch, and this is indeed the psak followed by a minority of Sephardi communities, is to light first and then is to make the bracha first and then to light. Now, the rationale behind this psak, did you hear my explanation which I spoke about saying brachas before doing mitzvahs, or had I frozen already by that point?
Yes, we heard that. Thank you.
You heard that, yeah. So since, normally speaking, we light in advance of saying, we make a bracha in advance of doing the mitzvah, it's appropriate to, according to the view of the Shulchan Aruch, to similarly make the bracha and then do the mitzvah. What about the issue of accepting Shabbos? Well, the view of the Shulchan Aruch is that this isn't a concern. The bracha doesn't bring in Shabbos. All one says when I'm saying the bracha is that I'm about to do the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles. There's nothing inherent in the bracha which says that I'm accepting Shabbos. I'm simply making a regular bracha on a mitzvah, on the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles. It's the lighting that starts Shabbos, because the lighting is preparing for Shabbos and is lighting the Shabbos candles, and through so doing, inducting and bringing Shabbos in. Making the bracha, that doesn't start Shabbos, and therefore there shouldn't be a concern with making the bracha and then lighting. So in brief, Ashkenazi view is it's the bracha that brings in Shabbos, therefore we light and then say the bracha. The view of the Shulchan Aruch, followed by a minority of Sephardi communities, is to make the bracha first. The bracha doesn't bring in Shabbos, it's the lighting that brings in Shabbos, and therefore we don't need concerns about the bracha. However, in deference to the concept of trying to do a mitzvah only after the bracha, of making the bracha before doing the mitzvah, the Ashkenazi custom is to cover one's eyes after lighting, as soon as possible after lighting, and then make the bracha, and then uncover one's eyes, and then enjoy and benefit from the light of the candles. And this way, to a degree, one is getting the best of both worlds. One is lighting the candles, then making the bracha, through making the bracha accepting Shabbos. I've lit before I accept the Shabbos, therefore it's not a concern. But if I immediately cover my eyes and therefore I'm not yet benefiting from the light, I make the bracha and then benefit from the light. And in benefiting from the light, I am now gaining from the mitzvah, and therefore made the bracha before one aspect of the mitzvah. And as I mentioned, even though this is the view of the Ramah and followed by all Ashkenazim, and even though the Shulchan Aruch argues with it, many Sephardi communities follow the Ashkenazi practice in this respect. This was the view in Iraq, this was the custom in Morocco, and the majority of, certainly all Ashkenazim and even most Sephardim follow this practice, though everyone should follow the minhag in their family. Now, all of this applies to ladies who light. When men light, there is no presumption of acceptance of Shabbos, because normally, as we said, the classic fulfillment of this mitzvah is one that was adopted upon themselves by ladies, even though in truth this is an obligation on whoever is at home really needs to do the mitzvah. Nonetheless, the mitzvah has been adopted primarily by ladies. But if a man is doing the mitzvah of lighting because they are single or their spouse isn't around, or whatever the case may be, they have the obligation to ensure their home is lit up, and therefore they have the mitzvah of Hadlokas Nerot Shabbos. Nonetheless, there is no presumption in that case that Shabbos is accepted either through the bracha or through the act of lighting. And therefore, when a man lights, there's no presumption of accepting Shabbos, and therefore he should make the bracha first and only then light the candles, because that way one is making the bracha before doing the lighting. And since the custom of men is to accept Shabbos only after davening mincha in shul, to verbally accept Shabbos and not at the time of candle lighting, this isn't a concern. Now, what's the issue? What's the story with blowing out the flame of the match? Come on, blow out the flame of the match after lighting the candles on Erev Shabbos. So some people have the practice not to blow out the match or to extinguish it, to shake it to extinguish it, but to let it go out by itself, so to put it in a little dish to let it go out by itself. Now the logic of this is that if Shabbos has started, one shouldn't be putting the match out. However, as we've seen, in fact, this doesn't make sense. The lighting of the flame of the flame, according to Ashkenazi practice, is not what brings in Shabbos. It's making the bracha that does this. So therefore, in the same way as I can light the candles, and I haven't accepted Shabbos, I can also blow out the flame of the match without accepting Shabbos. I would then make the bracha. So the correct order for Ashkenazim is to light the match, light the candles, blow out the flame of the match, or shake out the match to extinguish the flame of the match, and then to cover one's eyes and say the bracha, and with saying the bracha, the onset of Shabbos starts. For Sephardim, however, who are of the view that they should first make the bracha and then light, because the lighting is what accepts Shabbos. Indeed, in that case, they shouldn't blow out the candle, the flame, but should rather let shouldn't blow out the match, but should rather let the flame of the match extinguish itself. So in brief, Sephardim who follow the minority opinion of the minority Sephardim who follow the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch, who make the bracha first and then light, through the lighting of the candle they've accepted Shabbos, and therefore they can no longer blow the match out. For Ashkenazim, the acceptance of Shabbos is through the bracha, and therefore there's a simple solution, which is to extinguish the match and then make the bracha. I would point out that on Yom Tov, the story is a little different, because on Yom Tov, we make the bracha before lighting the candles. And the reason we do this is because you are allowed to light flames on Yom Tov. So we light the match, make the bracha, light the candle. We make the bracha, light the match, light the candles, and in so doing, accept Yom Tov upon ourselves. Now that at that point that we've accepted Yom Tov upon ourselves, we shouldn't anymore blow out the candle, because we've already accepted Yom Tov upon ourselves, and therefore at that point we should no longer blow out the match, and therefore we should let the match extinguish itself. I got a little distracted there because I saw I received a text, but unfortunately because I need to speak on my phone, I'm unable to see the text. So if I can ask, if you can either ask questions directly by unmuting yourself, please ask the questions directly, but unfortunately this week, whilst I have internet connections, I'm unable to see the chat, unless you post the chat on my I appear twice in the on the participants record. If you post it to both of if you wish to post a question privately, post it to both of them. I may be able to see it on the computer, but unfortunately I can't see chat questions on my phone.
I think it was me. Can I quickly ask the question?
Yes, please do so. Yeah.
Thank you. My question was, sorry if this is a numpty question, are your eyes supposed to be open or closed when you cover them and say the Beracha? Doesn't matter.
I don't know if there's a particular minhag in that respect. The point is that you're covering it to indicate that you're not yet getting benefit from the flame, and after you uncover your eyes, then you're getting the benefit from the Shabbos flame.
Thanks.
Okay, so I apologise again that... Yes, sure.
Sorry, Rob, may I also ask a question? You said that we quickly cover our eyes and make the Beracha. Now, general minhag, I think, is that we actually pull our hands towards, sort of wave our hands towards us 3 times first. Now, that's obviously delaying the covering the eyes, and you haven't mentioned that. I wonder if there's something I'm missing there.
You're correct. There are various minhagim around that. The main point here is that you're not benefiting from the light, or you choose not to benefit from the light until you've made the bracha, and therefore that's why one should try and cover one's hands immediately. No one is exactly sure of a basis for this idea of waving one's hands. There's a number of different ideas that are put forward to suggest what the idea of waving the hands and waving the hands 3 times. It may symbol that one is pushing away from oneself the care of the weak, and therefore one's doing a pushing away motion. Others do the opposite motion, in which they bring in the Kedusha of Shabbos. They're sort of beckoning in the Kedusha of Shabbos, and beckoning in the Neshama Yosera, the extra soul that we get on Shabbos. They're bringing into themselves everything, because Shabbos is all about being rather than doing. And this is the source of this minhag to sort of move one's hands 3 times. But there's not really a clear, and as far as I know, I couldn't find a clear sort of explanation of doing it. But certainly the thought that one has in mind when one's doing it is that resting on Shabbos doesn't just happen by itself. One needs to draw Shabbos into oneself and deliberately make a decision to dismiss the distractions of the week. And therefore, the thought one should have in mind as one's waving the hands is, I'm actually bringing Shabbos in on myself. I recognize I've just been running and preparing for Shabbos, and I've had all the hassle of everything I need to do. And now I'm about to start Shabbos. I'm deliberately pushing away all the distractions and bringing in the Kedusha of Shabbos. So there's a nice sort of meditative experience. If that's your practice, then you should indeed close your eyes at first before so doing, so that you're not benefiting from the candle until you make the bracha. So in brief, if your practice is immediately to cover your eyes, I'm not aware of any reason to close your eyes. It's the same thing. You're covering your eyes, you're closing your eyes. If your practice is to beckon in Shabbos, and as one goes forward, bring in the Kedusha Shabbos, as one moves one's hands back, push off all the distractions of the weekday, then you should close your eyes when you're doing this, that you're not benefiting from the light. But again, these are matters of minhag, and there's not exactly clear halachic sources around, as far as I could find, around these things. Okay, so this is the order of lighting and saying the brachas. As I mentioned, when one lights before the onset of Yom Tov that falls on a weekday, then the bracha is said beforehand, before lighting, because in that case, there's no issue with lighting after accepting the Kedusha, the sanctity of Yom Tov upon ourselves. However, in that case, one needs to be careful not to extinguish the flame of the match. So this is the procedure of lighting. What else can we say about the procedure of lighting before we look at some of these halachas in a little more depth? One thing is that when one lights the Shabbat candles, one should hold the match against the wick of the flame until the flame is strong and burning, rather than just very briefly touching it and letting it sort of be a very weak flame which gradually burns and brings itself to stronger light.
The reason for this is a hiddur mitzvah, to ensure that immediately upon the lighting I've directly caused a strong flame, and this is modelled on the practice in the Beis HaMikdash. In fact, last week's Sedra we just read the mitzvah of lighting the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, and the language of the pasuk is Baha'aloscha es haneros, when you cause to Baha'alotcha, lahalot, when you cause to rise up the flames. So causing to rise up, to elevate the flames. Baha'aloscha es haneros means when you elevate the flames, meaning to say that when the Kohen used to light the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash, he would ensure that the flames were elevated, that they were lifted up, and the flames therefore had a sort of strength to them immediately. And we follow that practice when we're lighting the flames of Shabbos, that one should hold the match against them long enough to light up to cause the flames to be elevated. One should also know that one shouldn't light a non-mitzvah light from the flames of Shabbos, because the flames of Shabbos are now an item of mitzvah, and therefore they should be treated with respect. However, one can use one flame to light another flame of Nerot Shabbos, because then they are both mitzvah lights, and therefore it's not a debasement of the mitzvah to use the flame to light another flame. However, lighting a mundane or weekday flame, one shouldn't use the Nerot Shabbos directly for that, unless one is stuck. So, for example, perhaps this is often more applicable on Yom Tov, where one may want to use one's Yom Tov candles for lighting the gas used for cooking or the light, and ideally one shouldn't do so, which is why we have a special light prepared for lighting the Yom Tov candles. So this is the order of lighting. Now, looking a little more in depth at a couple of features of this, I mentioned that ideally speaking, one should daven mincha before lighting the Shabbos candles. Why should one daven mincha before lighting the Shabbos candles? Because, as we said, through lighting, Shabbos is normally accepted. The assumption is that through lighting, Shabbos is accepted, and indeed, this is a good thing. The correct way is to light the Shabbos lights, and therefore for it immediately to be Shabbos with the lighting. If, however, one is running late, better to light the Shabbos candles on time rather than to risk lighting them after the start of Shabbos, and then to finish off preparations which don't involve Chil Shabbos. And if one is lighting early because there's a need to light a little early and then to continue not to keep Shabbos, for example, if one is eating out or needs to travel somewhere, then one can light and specify a condition that I'm not accepting Shabbos upon myself, and then carry on doing that which one needs to do. But this is not the ideal setup, and next week we'll talk about scenarios in which one's going out for the Shabbos meal, what the best thing to do is in terms of lighting and eating out, and so on and so forth. So in brief, one should normally accept Shabbos upon oneself when one lights the Shabbos candles. The presumption would be that the default setting is that this is indeed what one's doing, that one is accepting Shabbos through lighting. However, if need be, one can make a condition not to accept Shabbos. What happens if one hasn't had time to daven mincha and one's approaching the time of Shabbos? So ideally, as I said, one should say daven mincha first because it's weekday mincha and then light. But let's say one's running late. So again, one should not delay lighting the Shabbos candles in order to daven mincha, because one will risk breaking Shabbos by delaying lighting. So better to light, but with the condition of not accepting Shabbos, and then daven mincha, and rather than risking going over the time and accepting and lighting after the start time of Shabbos. What happens if one lit one's Shabbos candles and then realized that one hadn't davened mincha? So there are poskim of the view that it is too late and one can't daven mincha, weekday mincha, because one has already accepted Shabbos. The alternative opinion is, and this is a very fascinating concept, that with lighting the Shabbos candles, we accept Shabbos to the degree that we don't do Melacha. However, it isn't yet actually Shabbos. This makes us think a little bit about what we mean by the concept of Tosefet Shabbos, of adding to the time of Shabbos. It's something we take very for granted, but actually isn't so intuitive. Meaning to say, when does real Shabbos start? With sunset, or maybe a few moments before sunset, when Friday turns into Shabbos. Shabbos is a day of the week, and the day of the week is triggered by astronomical events, by the setting of the sun and the end of Friday. So what does it mean to accept Shabbos early? How does Shabbos being accepted early take in and bring in Shabbos? So we take this for granted as a sort of halachic concept called Tosefes Shabbos. I can add, Tosefes Shabbos, I can add to Shabbos somehow by bringing it early. It's not at all clear cut what the exact mechanism behind this is, and it may indeed be the case that Shabbos can come in stages, and that once I fully accept Shabbos by, for example, saying Mizmor Shel Yom Shabbos, then indeed Shabbos is completely accepted. However, the act of lighting Shabbos candles is only a partial acceptance of Shabbos, meaning that I shouldn't do prohibited activity, but not yet that it ceases to be Friday, and therefore I can daven mincha of weekday even after I've lit the Shabbos candles. So in brief, ideally speaking, daven weekday mincha first, then light the candles. If one can't do that, make a condition that one isn't accepting Shabbos through lighting the candles and then daven mincha. However, if one forgot to daven mincha and lit the candles without making any conditions, then after lighting the candles, one can still daven the weekday mincha. It is true that one can no longer do forbidden activities of Shabbos. However, this doesn't mean to say that it is exactly Shabbos, and therefore one can still light the weekday lighting candles. Someone has posted in the group questions to me about the time of lighting in connection with Plug HaMincha and so on and so forth. I hope to address the issue of timing of Shabbos candles. What's the earliest time one can light? I hope to address that probably next week, depending on where we get up to. So what we've discussed so far is the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos candles. This mitzvah is primarily, as we said, upon ladies to do. It includes certainly lighting Shabbos candles, but also ensuring that the whole house is alight for Shabbos, including lighting the electrical house lights around the rest of the light. We discussed the order of lighting, which for the mainstream minhag is to light and then make the bracha. And we said there isn't a problem with extinguishing the match on Shabbos, but there is a problem with extinguishing the match on Yom Tov once one's already accepted Yom Tov. And then we discussed the conundrum of mincha, whether it makes sense to daven a weekday mincha after accepting Shabbos upon oneself. And certainly the ideal model is to daven mincha first and only then accept Shabbos upon oneself. I want to use this opportunity, because I've spoken about electric lights, to just go on a little bit of a detour and discuss whether one can indeed fulfill the mitzvah of Hadlokas Nerot Shabbos, of lighting Shabbos lights, through lighting electric lights on Shabbos. Now, electric lights provide a very good quality light, and therefore would appear to be a reasonable manner to fulfill the mitzvah of lighting Shabbos lights. However, they have several halachic questions around them. The first halachic question around them is that they are not specific or dedicated and clearly extra for Shabbos, since we use electric lights the whole week. And therefore it is true that if all we need to do is to ensure that the house is alight for Shabbos, then it is sufficient to use electric lights. If we wish to do a specific act that is done the covered Shabbos, this is more visible and apparent when we light candles or other forms of flame lights rather than electric lights, which could be seen as being identical to the rest of the week. That's one issue. A second issue is there indeed a flame with an electric light? Now, in the old-fashioned filament light bulbs, that they call filament or incandescent light bulbs, there is a glowing piece of metal which has the halachic status of a flame. In most modern bulbs, which are LEDs or fluorescent, there is no glowing filament, and therefore there's no flame. In addition, even in the old incandescent lights, there is a glowing flame, but there isn't a fuel source there. What is there? There's the constant generation of electricity by the power station traveling along through the power grid and eventually arriving in my light bulb and allowing the light bulb flame to burn. So if a Nerot Shabbos means not a light of Shabbos, but as the correct translation of Shabbos, a lamp or a lantern of Shabbos, meaning a container with a fuel source and a flame, one could argue that a light bulb is lacking one or even two aspects of this. If it's not an incandescent light bulb, it provides light, but there's no glowing filament and therefore no flame. I mean, even if there is an incandescent light, there isn't a present fuel source, but rather just the electricity being generated, and therefore it doesn't have a fuel, and therefore maybe it doesn't fulfill the definition of Ner Shabbos. So here really the poskim split into two directions. Direction one opinion is, we need to look at Ner Shabbos from a functionality perspective. What is the functionality of the Ner Shabbos? To ensure there's light. And therefore an electric light provides light. It's true there may not be a flame, it's true there may not be a fuel source, but it offers light and that is sufficient. The alternative viewpoint is no, one needs a Ner, one needs a light with a flame and a fuel source. A flame provides a different sort of quality of experience, and therefore light bulbs, certainly LED and fluorescent light bulbs, and perhaps even incandescent light bulbs, are missing critical features. And this remains an unresolved halachic dilemma, with different rabbanim taking different stances around the matter. My personal view is that if one is in a situation where one is unable to light regular flame lights, i.e. candle lights or oil lights, then such as in a hospital, then one should light I seem to have lost the internet connection again on my other setting. Then one should light. In fact, I'm just going to close this off because it seems to be problematic. I apologise for the technical disruptions. If one is in a hospital or perhaps even a hotel where they won't let one light, then it is worth lighting an electric light in order to do the mitzvah. However, in normal situations, one should not rely on electric lights. And similarly, when one is lighting an electric light, one shouldn't make a bracha on that act of lighting. So just to summarize what I said, an electric light seems to have potentially several problems. Some poskim are not concerned about these problems because they are pragmatic and they say all that matters is it provides a good light. Other poskim are concerned. They say the mitzvah of Hadlakas Shabbos is Ner Shabbos, a flame with a fuel source, and therefore don't believe electric lights are sufficient. In practical halacha, my personal stance is that if you have no other option, such as in a hospital, it's worth lighting an electric light. However, one shouldn't make a bracha on it because it is not clear cut that one has fulfilled the mitzvah through so doing. So this concludes what I wanted to say about how one lights. Given the technical disruption, I'll just mention one more halacha and then I'll draw it to an early conclusion today because I'm struggling a little bit with giving the shir via the phone. And I'll comment on the issue of the time to light, which was raised in a chat question. What is the earliest time that one is allowed to light on Erev Shabbos? Now, we already discussed that the lighting needs to be attached to Shabbos. It needs to be a lighting for Shabbos, an act of preparation for lighting for Shabbos, and therefore it can't be too far removed from Shabbos itself. And the poskim identify an earliest time for lighting, which is the time of plug hamincha. The literal translation of plug hamincha is half of the mincha, and it's basically the midpoint between mincha katana and sunset. I'm not going to go into the technical details of it. It's basically 1.25 variable hours before sunset. So without going into the calculations, the maths of the calculations, if you look online at an online calendar, one can see the earliest time for lighting, which is synonymous with plug hamincha. So, for example, on our shul calendar at neisrael.co.uk/calendar, we have all the zamanim, and you will see there that earliest candle lighting this Friday night is 7:29 p.m., which is the same as plug hamincha, and one should indeed only light at that time. However, this can pose difficulties for those people who are davening as we do in our shul. We daven mincha at 7:15, followed by Kabbalas Shabbos. And in particular, this can lead to somewhat of a conundrum for someone who wishes to daven with a minyan, or, for example, if one has a single man who is doing their own lighting, but also needs to ensure that they get to mincha on time. And there's different stances again on the matter, as to how fixed this time of Plaka Mincha is. Doesn't mean that one can't light even a small amount of time beforehand, or can one light a little bit beforehand in order to get to shul on time. Some places say you can't light before Plaka Mincha, and therefore in such a case one would need to wait till 7:29, light one Shabbos candles and then go to shul, even though it will mean, for example, davening mincha by oneself outside shul. Other poskim of the opinion that the Plaka Mincha was not meant as an absolutely definitive time. It was meant as an indicative time for the earliest time of that kind of lighting, but one can light a little before, and therefore, even though normally speaking one shouldn't light before earliest candle lighting, which is 7:29, in a situation where that's the only way to get to shul on time, one can light a little earlier, light at 7:10, and then rush to go to shul. So this is for someone, for example, who is unable to light at home and also get to shul, one can rely on this, but otherwise one shouldn't light before the earliest candle lighting time. So I'll stop here. I apologize for an early finish, and I apologize for the disruption due to the technical problems. I see on my phone I've got a couple of chat questions. Yeah, there was a question posed, I won't go into this in detail, as to when men accept Shabbos. And indeed, as I said, whilst ladies are taken as accepting Shabbos with the lighting of the Shabbos candles, men, whether they are married or not, generally do not accept Shabbos through the lighting of Shabbos candles, but only at shul after mincha. And therefore, a man is allowed to drive to shul and daven the weekday minyan even after his wife has lit the Shabbos candles. A woman who lights the Shabbos candles, in contrast, should not drive to shul afterwards. And as I said, ideally, there's also the issue of davening weekday mincha, unless they have specified in advance that they don't accept Shabbos through lighting. But a man does not need to make the specification. The assumption is that there's no acceptance of Shabbos. So I'll stop here. If anyone wants to ask any questions, please feel free to do so. And I again want to apologize for a little bit of a disrupted share due to the technical problems.
Rabbi, can I ask you? Oh,
yes.
Sorry.
I have no way of moderating who asked first this week.
That's fine. Ilana, you go first. I'll go second. Okay.
Thanks, Daniela. Rabbi, I had a question about the Yom Tov lighting. I don't know if I misunderstood you. That you say the Beracha first, then that accepts Yom Tov because you can light on Yom Tov. But if that's the case, how can you light your match?
So the ideal thing to do on Yom Tov lighting is light the match, say the Beracha, and then light the Yom Tov candle. That's the optimum way of doing the Yom Tov candle lighting.
But then how do you, sorry to ask us, I don't know, how do you cover your eyes with your hands if you've got a lit match in your hand?
No, so for Yom Tov lighting, you don't need to do that. The whole reason for covering the eyes is because normally we say a bracha before doing the mitzvah. However, with Shabbos lighting, we can't say the bracha before doing the mitzvah, and therefore we cover our eyes. So in other words, the issue is we don't want to say the bracha and accept Shabbos and then do the lighting. So what we do is we light, we cover our eyes, we say the bracha, and then we enjoy the benefits of the lighting. On Yom Tov, however, you're not allowed to light a match, as you correctly say. However, you are allowed to transfer a flame. So since you're allowed to transfer a flame on Yom Tov, you can make the bracha over Yom Tov candles, then immediately transfer the flame from your match up to light the candles, or from a pre-lit candle if you've got like a yahrzeit light that's a light, and then make the bracha and follow the normal procedure of making the bracha before you light. I'll tell you actually a little bit of history that's interesting. This is how the Mishnah Berurah brings it, and this is based on the teaching of a very important commentary on the Torah called the Drisha, Yeshua Falk, and he quotes this proudly in the name of his mother, who pointed out this halacha to him and taught him that this is the appropriate way to do, based on the logic that we have that we've discussed.
That's really interesting. Thank you.
A pleasure. I think someone else was trying to ask a question.
Yes, so this is Daniela asking now. Right, so a woman brings in Shabbos when she lights. If one had brought in Shabbos and one's husband has not yet brought in Shabbos, and you suddenly remember you've forgotten to turn the fridge off or one of the other myriad of things that on a busy day you've forgotten to do, can one ask one's husband to do it? And if so, directly, indirectly, or not at all? I mean, what situation?
So this is also an excellent question. And the answer is you can ask directly to do so. I'm not going to go into all the technical details of why this is, but it actually links up a little bit to what we spoke about before, that the concept of it bringing in additional time for Shabbos is not such a clear-cut idea. And even though Shabbos starts through the lighting, it doesn't have the full stringency of Shabbos yet at that point, and therefore one can directly ask one's spouse to do so.
Thank you.
Rabbi Zobin, will I be able to ask a question as well? I'm sorry, I know you were trying to end early.
No, I'm absolutely delighted to take questions. I'm trying to end early simply because I'm frustrated by technology. I'm finding it very, very hard to give share. Zoom's always a bit of a struggle, but using a phone is a nightmare. But if they're questions, I'm truly delighted to take them.
Okay, I had two questions. The first one is, you hear this concept of someone who has forgotten to light candles one week, and then the following Shabbos, and then from there on, they light an extra candle. I was just interested to know where that comes from and if that is a legitimate thing. Is it a genuine thing that one should be doing if that happens?
Okay, it's again an excellent question. And the answer is as follows. It is a genuine thing and it has an absolute source, which is a concept of a knas, a fine or a penalty for forgetting to light. However, there's a number of ways of fulfilling this penalty, including instead of lighting an extra light, rather lighting a larger light or a light that will burn for longer. So if it's a situation of embarrassment where one doesn't want to permanently light an extra light, one can switch to using a fuller light source. And the concept behind this is that of teshuvah. I lost this important mitzvah, and therefore I should make sure that I don't do it again, and I learn the lesson from it. And this is the idea of the knas. However, it is vanishingly rare for the knas to be relevant nowadays. And the reason for this is that we have our homes are very lit up. They are always light to electric lights. And therefore, even though, as I said, we light our homes up with Shabbat candles, nonetheless, the reality is that your home is very well lit up with electric lights, which you have on the Lahavah Shabbos because you want to have them on burning over the Shabbos. And therefore, effectively, you haven't forgotten to light the Shabbos candles, even though you have done it in a far from optimal manner by only using your regular electric lights, as I explained, rather than lighting specifically candles that cover Shabbos. And therefore, in reality, it's almost unheard of nowadays that the knas, the penalty, should be applicable, because even though not lighting is a terrible thing and one has lost the optimal fulfillment of the mitzvah, because we have electric lights burning, one has fulfilled the less than optimal kiyum fulfillment of the mitzvah.
Thank you. And if possible, just one other question, particularly pertaining to England in the summer. So as the minhag is across many shuls, we bring in Shabbos at, davening mincha 7:15, 7:30, whatever it is. I was just wondering, what time should the woman be lighting candles? Although the earliest time for candle lighting is 7:29, there is a concept of you should be makabel Shabbos at the time when the community brings in Shabbos. But is there still room for an individual to, say, light Shabbos candles later than that time when the community is technically, getting to Mizmor Shir?
Okay. So again, an excellent question. If one is, for a regular lady, and if one does not need to go to shul, the first thing is do not light before the earliest candle lighting, 7:29. As I explained, only really for a difficult situation, for example, a single person who has no solution to light at home and then come to shul, can one move the time of earliest lighting a little earlier. What about the latest time for lighting? So ideally speaking, one should accept Shabbos at the time that the community accepts Shabbos. And therefore, for example, in there where we start davening at 7:15 mincha, we'll get to Kabbalah Shabbos, to Mizmor Shir Yom Shabbos, or actually in there we're Kabbalah Shabbos perhaps to Beracha. One might only get there at 8 o'clock, let's say, and therefore by that time one should light. However, if need be, one can start Shabbos at an even later time than that, as long as one obviously doesn't get later than 15 minutes before sunset. Now, if you look in the classic halachic sources, they say that one should accept Shabbos the time that the community accepts Shabbos, but that was because they were in a mono community. They were in towns where the whole community kept one minhag. However, in a large city like London, there are a significant variety of shuls, some of which would accept Shabbos early and some of which accept Shabbos later. And therefore, even though ideally one should accept Shabbos at the time or start of one's own kehillah, nonetheless, since we are in a large city where there's a variety of kehillahs, if one is running late, one can accept Shabbos later, because one doesn't need to be drawn after one's own kehillah, one can therefore accept Shabbos later. So in brief, ideally one should accept Shabbos the time one's community does and the time one's spouse does, but if need be, one can go later than that as long as one doesn't head towards the latest time of lighting.
Thank you.
A pleasure. Okay, thank you everyone so much for joining as always, and once again apologies for the technical disruption this week. I wish you all a good Shabbos and be well.
Thank you. Good Shabbos.
Pleasure.